If you're Mikel Arteta, you're feeling rather satisfied with yourself right now, though not 100%, which is probably justified in some way. I mean, no Premier League manager should feel 100% satisfied with themselves just yet. Just yet. This Arsenal side are building towards something, and it's quite clear where they are trying to get to. Their end goal is to be competing with the very top sides in the league, and that was the criticism of them at the start of the season. They fell just short last season when competing with those top sides, and they fell especially short when it came to getting into the trenches and basically going, right, this game's going to be a tricky one. How are we going to win this? There were times where obviously people said they could see improvements. Obviously, they saw that Arsenal were a better team. But in moments where they needed to dig something out, in moments where they were missing a couple of key players, they seemed to drop away. Come a couple of months on, fast forward to this point, and we're seeing that even with the likes of Zinchenko, Odegaard out, and one or two other players on any other kind of player, you've got a team here that can still go out and win a game, can still dominate, can still basically be conservative when they need to be, and at the same time also still play the Arsenal style of football. That is what coaching is about, having more than just a starting 11 and having a squad of players. Something quite satisfying if you're watching Arsenal right now and you thought Mikel Arteta was building towards this alongside the other people who have also built as well, Edu, etc., Arsenal. Those people will be currently looking at this Arsenal side and saying, if we can add a couple more pieces in there, then in the long run, I don't quite know where that ceiling is. Of course, they are aided by the fact that they don't have Champions League football right now, and they were aided by the fact that they didn't play midweek, and I get that. And there were always going to be people who seem to want to find a yeah, but with Arsenal. And that was probably because they were so conclusive for such a long time, because they were so much more conclusively better than any other competitor for Manchester United at that point. So, now at this point, after they've lost to Manchester United, after they've had a disappointing result, after you'd imagine that Mikel Arteta will have wanted to have proven himself at Old Trafford, will have said to those players, that's probably on me tactically in this game. I think I've probably let you down there. You can see that the players wanted to go out and prove it even more. You could see that the players wanted to make a statement in this game. And granted, I think Brentford are probably primed for that. And granted, a couple of the other teams they've played this season are probably primed for that as well. But that doesn't mean that these weren't wins. That doesn't mean that they aren't building towards something. And you know what? It's way better to be losing against Manchester United now than on the back end of the season. It's way better to be closer to those teams at this point and making tactical mistakes rather than doing that on the other end of the season when there can be a momentum shifting loss. Early on, and especially with the World Cup this year, this season is going to be structured so differently that people are almost going to get two seasons, two shorter, condensed versions of seasons, but two seasons that are then added up. We will see how well teams deal with adversity. We will see how well teams deal with a little time off. We will maybe see what a winter break looks like in the Premier League. And you'd imagine that teams are planning for that. Of course, next, if Arsenal had continued and the games hadn't have been postponed and whatever else with everything going on, they would have played Man City. And yet, in the next month, they will still play Liverpool and Spurs within that time. The real tests, the real gauge of where Arsenal are at the moment. And of course, that is only one of the things that contributes to that gauge. Let me talk about some of the individual performances today. Fantastic to not see Odegaard in the side and to see other players bossing that play out there. You saw there was Vieira, Saka, Martinelli, all two of those guys subbed, and then Gabriel Jesus just ahead of that. In the past, you would have said, hey, they're missing their captain today. Arsenal won't perform. You would have said, this side isn't going to have the dominance or the wherewithal to be able to dominate a team like Brentford, especially a tactically smart Brentford side. But Brentford didn't quite look at the races today, and Arsenal capitalised. You'd also have said the same when, a lot of people would want to criticise Xhaka in the base of the midfield. A great assist today. A lot of people would, in previous seasons, have said, well, Partey doesn't really turn up for some of these games. Partey isn't really up for it. This guy looks physically sharp this season and he looks very much in the zone, at least for Arsenal. By the way, that's not to say there aren't still mistakes that Arsenal are making from time to time. Granted, Xhaka still managed to get his yellow card today. There are still other people out there who every now and again, they have a slight brain fart. But there are other players in the side who are building something here. I've not even mentioned Ramsdale yet in this review. And Ramsdale has changed the shape of the side. Now players get into different positions. He's got good distribution. His vision is straight ahead. He makes brave passes on a regular basis. And you can see as soon as he gets the ball, the players are trying to move for him. It's very different to when Leno was there, what they were encouraging him to do, the nervousness that surrounded Leno. They've got a goalkeeper here who's willing to try things, who's willing to be brave, in his distribution at least. That's respectable. So there is a lot to be celebrated here, but you have to look at where Arsenal have been in order to appreciate where Arsenal are now. It isn't just about saying, well, it's only about this point in this point here, and we can only focus on now because that's where Mikel Arteta is at. There is a building process to get to this point. And there are Arsenal fans who are very cognizant of that right now. You could tell the away fans and even just the Emirates at the moment appreciate the difference between where their team have been and where their team is now. There is almost an element of surprise and gratitude around Arsenal right now that they're in this position. Because for so long, it looked as if they would be stuck in this wilderness situation for such a long time. And you can really tell that people are taking Arsenal much more seriously now, because the fallout from the loss they had against Manchester United was not, you guys suck, you are losers, you're the ones who couldn't quite do this. It was, that was a close one. They'll probably regroup and go from there. In the past, that wouldn't have been the case. It would have been, you lost to a rebuilding Manchester United side, you lost on this. There would have been more and more ideas of this capitulation of Arteta, compounding of the idea that they are not up to it. Something worth noting, of course, is that Arsenal are top of the league after 7 games granted, and so we can't really look at the league table, but it's beginning to shape up there, right? They're ahead of everyone else, especially ahead of City, and they're slightly ahead of them by 1 point, obviously, only a couple of points over Spurs. So other teams are keeping up, but we'd have expected maybe we'd have expected Arsenal. Yeah, we would have expected Arsenal to lose ground by this point. We would have expected them to slip up more than they have already, but they lead the Premier League. There is something to be celebrated about Arsenal being top of the league now and making a difference to the perception of Arsenal. Other teams are chasing them at the moment. I get it. It's not always down to the chase at this point, but you're top of the league. Celebrate that for a minute. We asked the question yesterday whether Spurs were as good or better than Arsenal. But weirdly, the two teams look to dominate and change the game in different ways. Spurs will sit back a lot more and then try and spring on the other side. Arsenal much more possession-based, trying to then dominate the game. And then, like I said, it's that yin and yang between Conte and Arteta, not meaning they don't have appreciation for each other, but meaning there is an element of balance between the two that maybe the other one doesn't quite have. Maybe there are times where people say, hey, Arteta could be a bit more intense. Arteta could have a bit more of that dog in him, even though we know he's got the dog. And going the other way, you would say people would have also wanted Conte to have a bit more of what Arteta's got, a bit more of that calmness, the politician in him in the right moments to go, maybe I won't say that right now. And yet, I still think there are hidden depths to both of these managers, especially Arteta in this league. Once you have some success, people assume there must be more depth to you. Once you have some form of vindication, people assume there is much more. So we always know there is something in those eyes of Antonio Conte, something in him which understands the players as men. And yet with Arteta, there are those questions. After the whole documentary and the whole all or nothing thing where people were making fun of the Hearts, by the way, Arsenal have leaned into that, and the brains, the drawings, the small team speeches, which people seem to want to undermine at some point. People seemed to think that Arteta was somehow only on the surface here. They didn't seem to understand what was below that, which is what Pep Guardiola seems to see, which is what the players seem to see, which is what the people who spend the day on day-to-day basis with Arteta appreciating. So, there's that old phrase of treat the other person you're speaking to as if they know something you don't. Why is it that we always treat Premier League managers as if we know something that they don't? As if the glaringly obvious to us aren't the same solutions that they're trying to solve, or that the glaringly obvious to us are glaringly obvious to them, but they have other things that are priorities, and they believe if they fix those other priorities, then those other things will get fixed. We treated Arsene Wenger for years, we didn't, but Arsenal fans did, as if he was some sort of senile old man. Now they treat Arteta as if he is some kind of young, naive coach. And he does make naive mistakes sometimes. He made some naive mistakes even in this game. Sometimes his sides, I don't want to say are, but feel a little naive in the way that they play. So, of course, some of these characteristics are important, but what we seem to do is want to fix Arsenal into this. Arsenal are sub these other sides. Arsenal are not as good as these other teams. They went toe-to-toe with Manchester United. They dominated the game with Manchester United. They've gone out and dominated a number of teams this season. Against Brentford last year, it was very different, although COVID did make a difference last year. But against Brentford last year, it was very different. So let's appreciate the difference. Players were out today for Arsenal. This wasn't their ideal starting 11, and I get it. Tierney is a great not even fill-in left-back. He's a leading left-back for Arsenal. And you've got some lovely players. That's exactly why they bought Fabio Vieira this season. Great goal. Really good interplay with other players and lots more intricate play. By the way, another thing that is hard for Arsenal. Lots of intricate play out there in the Premier League, but not all of it comes to an end. Arsenal were playing it consistently throughout this game. Even in the 70th, 80th minute, they were going for those goals. So don't tell me that these are just little stints where we're seeing these things. The peaks that we saw earlier on this season are now becoming sustained periods within a game where they, as the commentary said, slowly turn the screw. This Arsenal team is about patience. It's not necessarily about being explosive all the time. And we're so used to seeing, obviously, successful sides being these explosive types. There are explosive moments. We saw some brilliant bits from Arsenal, but there is that patience, the passing. Mikel Arteta is a patient manager. He will be encouraging his players to be patient as well. It's why they look so calm. It's why when you see Martinelli turning his shoulder going the other way, when you see Saka doing the same thing, you know that there is thought behind this stuff. These aren't just hanging a leg out there and just seeing what happens. We know the movements that Arsenal are trying to make. We know where they're trying to move their opponents. And we've not even talked about the chaos of the likes of Gabriel Jesus this season. Of course, Gabriel Jesus came in and people were going to compare him to any other striker in the Premier League, but they can't. You can't compare him to a Haaland, you can't compare him to a Nunez, even though he offers something of the Haaland in that obviously he provides a focal point, and he offers something of the Nunez where he offers a little bit of that chaos. He's neither of those, of course, he's not nearly as big as either of them, but he provides something for this Arsenal team. He provides that moving point that while they're moving the ball around, he's internally playing a little game with these two centre-backs here. He's dropping a little deeper and adding something into that chaos there. He's smart enough and has good enough game management and leadership skills that he can get out there and do these things. That is what you want from a player that you sign, especially, by the way, when you don't have Odegaard. Now, I understand there were some challenges, but not many from Brentford today, and it is about that balance that Arsenal now have. They have two very confident centre-backs, of course, when they're not challenged like this by Brentford. But when they are challenged by the likes of, say, Manchester United, they got pulled apart. They got moved all over the place. I was quite surprised you didn't see Brentford do that today. I get it. These aren't the tests that Arsenal need to pass in the immediate and at the very top of the list of the tests, right? But these are the tests that Arsenal need to make it through because they didn't make it through them before, because there were doubts over whether they could win these games in the previous season and the season before that. So these are just tick boxes for Arsenal this season. And Mikel Arteta will have set that as a goal at the start of the season. Consistency and winning the bigger games. He's done one of the two things so far. Where do you think Arsenal go from here? Are they better than Spurs? They're a completely different style. Personally, I love Conte, but I prefer the Arsenal style. And obviously I like Mikel Arteta as well. But I think what Arteta is building here and what Arteta's had the time to do and what Arteta has been given the latitude to be able to achieve is respectable at Arsenal. There was a time where you would have worried that they just get rid. That's not happened now. It's made the club a better club. It's made them, and as a fan base, a better fan base than where they were at before. So, we can doubt them all we want, but I think Arsenal are changing. And we shouldn't ignore the early changes and the small steps which build to suddenly become much bigger things. Let me know what you guys think. I'd be interested to know. I'll see you guys in a while. Much love. Bye.